Let's talk about full needle rib on the knitting machine. It's a wonderful, unique fabric. This shawl collar is made using full needle rib, as is the hem on the same garment. This is one of several versions of the shawl collared sweater that's recently been added to the Can You Top This book. The same book has some collars for polo shirts that we knit on the knitting machine, and so to a polo shirt that we make out of purchased knit. And one of those collars is made using full needle rib. I'll show you a couple more things I've done with full needle rib, and then we'll talk about its properties and, most importantly, how to accomplish it. The Stay Put scarf is made with full needle rib knitted in this direction. It's now part of the Keyhole scarf collection book, and I will be showing you the fundamentals about knitting the scarf later in this movie. The shawl with sleeves is made by combining full needle rib on the lower parts of the arm, transitioning to half fisherman's rib, and then full fisherman's rib. There is no change in stitch count whatsoever. It's the structure of the different fabrics that creates the shape. This pattern has now been added to my Snug as a Bug book. Each of the books that I mentioned, by the way, I will put links to them in the program notes. Also in the program notes are links to some free articles. Here's one full of deep details on full needle rib. There's also one on shaping using the technique I just described. And I keep adding things, so let me show you how to find them. From the home page, as you scroll down, you will see numerous subjects. Full needle rib is a machine knitting technique, so you tap that. You'll end up here where there are many machine knitting techniques listed, and I'm trying to keep them in alphabetical order, and there you go. There's the full needle rib article. When you tap it, you'll end up on the full needle rib page. Let's now examine the nature of the fabric. Here is the shawl with sleeve. This is the full needle rib part, which is much narrower than the half fisherman's and full fisherman's rib parts, but it is not as narrow as 1x1 rib using every other needle would be. That's simply because there are so many needles in work, twice as many as usual when knitting ribbing. Here's an interesting comparison for you. I'm using the same needle span for both of the fabrics you see here. The one on the far left is the same as the one on the far right. Full needle rib is in the middle. Now these two do not have the same number of needles in work because full needle rib has all the needles on both beds, and the 4x4 ribbing, that is 4 needles on the main bed alternating with 4 on the ribber, produces this incredibly skinny fabric by comparison. I was in the process of trying to design this scarf, and what I came up with is not the fabric that you just looked at. Instead, I settled on shaping with a combination of tubular knitting for the around the neck part and full needle rib for the bottom. I'm in the process of deciding how to make this pattern available, and I will let you know when I do decide. Because it is ribbing, full needle rib is very stretchy and very flexible. It allows the scarf to hug the neck area here and flip out to form a collar here. The fabric is completely reversible. Here we're peeking under the hem of the same sweater, and you can see it's full needle rib, and it looks exactly the same on both sides. The main part of this sweater is stockinette. Full needle rib is both a little wider than plain stockinette in the same yarn and a little bit heavier, and in this instance that did two good things: created a little bit of sneaky hip shaping and gave the hem some needed weight for the garment to hang well. I've got this photo on its side so that you can see it a little bit better, but you will have to rotate your head to see it properly. This sample was knitted on the Superba machine at stitch size 4/4. It's all full needle rib, and a number of sizes of yarn are detailed. They're all really skinny yarns. The heaviest amounts to a light fingering. With so many needles working so close together, it is essential to use the lighter end of what any particular machine will knit. The Stay Put scarf was knitted with this yarn on my bulky and that is the thickest yarn I would want to do full needle rib with on the bulky. It was actually some work. I would not have made a whole garment working that hard. You absolutely must have 2 full beds for full needle rib. I say that because the vast majority of ribbers or second beds have the same number of needles as the main bed, but there are a handful of antiques that do not. It's necessary to be able to rack the bed so that the needles will do what you see here. When they come out, all of them will come out and they will alternate. None will hit. This is swing H on Japanese machines, but whatever we call it, the setup that you want is so the needles will all come out but none will hit each other. I'm filming on a Superba because there's less glare because of the lack of gate pegs. So on the Superba, we're using the ribber at its highest setting. That's a unique to Superba issue. Most ribbers simply have one proper position to sit. I usually cast on full needle rib with the tubular cast on. So that means making a zigzag row. Both carriages should be set for normal knitting. The needles should be set up so they will pass each other safely, and you just knit across. We hang the comb and the weights in that row. Then we proceed with 2 tubular rows. Your manual will give you the exact details, and so will my article, How to Knit Tubular Hem. Tubular cast-ons and tubular hems are basically the same, and the article that I have shows how to do them on many kinds of machines. I also have some specific videos about it, which I'll link in the program notes. For the stay-put scarf, one edge is the cast-on, the other is the bind-off. And here's the gauge I got in DK yarn. The written pattern has 7 gauges, so you can make it on any 2-bed combination. But for this movie, I will give you the numbers for the gauge that I'm knitting here on my brother 260. Before we knit, you absolutely must swatch because there are some surprises about stitch size. You want the stitches to match on the 2 faces of the fabric. In order to make that happen, on my Passip and Superba machines, I can normally use the same size on each stitch dial. This fabric was knitted with both dials set on 4. On the Brother 260, I had the ribber set on 5 and the main bed set on 2.2, and I rechecked it multiple times because that seemed like such a gap, but it made great fabric. After the tubular cast on, we're going to knit either 7 or 8 inches worth of plain old full needle rib. This is what it will look like. At 6 rows per inch, which is what I got, it's either 42 or 48 rows. To help you choose, I'll tell you that this collar is 7 inches wide, and this one is 8. They will both roll outward if we want them to, but the 8-inch one has a larger turn down. And yes, as you have just spotted, a shawl collar and a sweater and the stay-put scarf are really the same thing. So we had a tubular cast on, 7 or 8 inches of full needle rib, and now a loose bind off. It's important that there still be lots of stretch, or the scarf won't lay properly on the body or flip out if we want it to. And I will tell you right now, I didn't get mine loose enough. I transferred all to the main bed and bound off around the gate pegs. I should have either bound off in ribbing or around 2 gate pegs. I had to take out my bind off and redo it. But that tubular cast on is not a thing of beauty just yet, so we're going to fix it. At the cast on edge, especially in the larger gauges, there will be bumps because you just can't get that tubular row tight enough. And for this project, I don't try because we really want the stretch. So we'll run the latch tool through every pair of loops and then make 1 chain stitch. The simplest way to set yourself up for this is to leave a very long yarn tail when you start, and that way you've got something to work with without attaching another yarn. Again, while filming, I underestimated the length of the stitches that I was going to require to really stretch enough. These were almost good enough, but I ended up undoing them and going back and making loops that were Each chained loop was about a 1/2 inch long, and that's what gave me the stretch that I really wanted. Once you understand the basics, the pattern is incredibly simple. Cast on 100 stitches on each bed. 100 needles are in work on each bed. Knit 42 or 48 rows in full needle rib. Bind off very loosely, either binding off directly in ribbing, or, as I really am more comfortable doing, transferring all stitches to the main bed and then binding off around 2 gate pegs. And that is what matches the chain stitching through the cast-on loops, again very loosely, to tidy up the cast-on. And that is it. Now loop the fabric around so that there's not a twist in it, but the 2 edges align at the bottom edge, and sew those 2 edges together. Any neat method of joining them that looks nice to you is okay, but I had the best success with single crocheting them together. I first tried chain stitch and it looked a little sloppy. Here's the lower edge joined with single crochet, working first in one stitch, then skipping a stitch, working in the second, then working in the next stitch, then the second stitch, and that produced a paste that made a nice edge. Also sew the edges together for about 1 inch up towards your head. Buttons are entirely optional, but if you choose to sew them on, pick big ones for drama and sew them through both layers of fabric.